Welcome to the new school. What we wanted to do was talk about the concept of authenticity and vulnerability in an industry that has typically been super buttoned up, super professional, and a little bit old school.
My name is Candace Carlton, and I'm the head of advisor education at Ficomm Partners, and I'm joined, as always, by my fabulous co-host and the CEO of Ficomm Partners, Meg Carpenter. I think what's really cool about the New School Video Podcast is we get to speak to all kinds of change makers, both inside our industry, the independent wealth management space, as well as outside our industry, and get their perspective on what it requires to create connection, find a different way, and build a business in alignment with their why, using money as an entry point to help people live more fulfilling lives. So that was like a whole bunch that I just said there. It's really like, how do you help people live more meaningful lives with money? This episode specifically is so aligned with that. We got to speak to Brian Portnoy, who is the founder of Shaping Wealth, which is a learning technology platform transforming the human experience of money. So for advisors, they have content and coaching to help them and their clients transform the human experience of money. I mean, how do you do that? How amazing is that? Brian is a CFA, he's an author, and he also is a PhD from the University of Chicago. So his insights and perspectives are fascinating and expanding. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. We are so excited to have Brian Portnoy on the podcast today. So Brian, I thought this really stood out from your Shaping Wealth website. You said, it was actually, I think, a video on your main page, and it said, we seek understanding. We want contentment. We seek well-being in all aspects, but getting there isn't easy. We say enough to refocus, take control, and elevate. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit of this. We are Shaping Wealth, a well-being platform devoted to changing the experience of money and helping people underwrite a meaningful life. And you say that you do this through coaching and content. So the first question I had is, how do you see content shaping people's well-being?
So I love this question. And, you know, we could go back to the ancient Greek philosophers to talk about how our self-understanding, our understanding of the world contributes to the good life. I doubt when you asked the question, you wanted me to go back to Plato and Aristotle. But the fact is that the three of us and our loved ones and everyone we know is thinking about what's a life well lived. And so, you know, we've got this modern world called content, but let's just call it knowledge. Let's just, you know, refer to the fact that we're trying to figure things out, and also stipulate that it's never been harder to do that, because we've never had to sort through more information, more data, more choice. So I think, you know, there's a case to be made that understanding the world around us contributes to our sense of well-being, but also the process of simplification makes a really powerful difference, because we don't want things simplistic, but we do want them simple. And anybody that can help people bring, you know, carry them along their journey from the complex to the simpler, I think is doing really good work. And, you know, we see it in our financial services world. There are some groups, and, you know, I've kind of tried to insert myself into that dialogue with, hey, let's simplify things. Let's clean it up a little bit. And that clarity hopefully inspires some of the well-being that we're talking about.
You know, when I was looking at that on your website and doing like all the research to have you on as a guest, thank you for being here. We're really excited about it. One of the things that I think occurred to me, I remember weirdly enough when I was in high school and I was in English class, and our English teacher used to put quotes up on the wall. And one day she put up this quote, and it said, "We read to know we're not alone." And at the time, I thought this is important, but I didn't quite understand it. But it kind of stayed top of mind. But I knew there was something really high impact about it. And so when I saw that you're building this content and coaching platform and usually using content as the vehicle to help people with their well-being, I was struck by that, because I think what it is we're all in this human experience, and through simplification, through other people's knowledge and experience, if we can relate to it as a common or shared experience, it makes us feel less alone. And if we can see real life examples of people who've used the experience to create more fulfillment, we then feel like it's more possible for ourselves.
Well, I'll quote for quote. One of my favorites, which I think fits in here, is from E.O. Wilson, who invented the field of sociobiology half a century ago. And he said, he recently passed, but he said some years ago that we're drowning in information but starved for wisdom. And that in and of itself strikes me as profoundly true. But then to follow on or build upon what you just said, the idea that we're in this together is, I think, affirming and healthy, but it's often fleeting and hard to wrap our brains around. One of the things that we found in coaching financial advisors, but also working with their clients as well, is that there's this two-step process of permission and validation, which lands really powerfully. I've actually, been surprised at how those conversations have gone at times, because just the mere act of saying, hey, we're allowed to go there. So in this cold, sharp-elbowed world of money and stocks and bonds and crypto and all this other noise, the fact that we're actually allowed to talk about what we really care about is empowering to people. And what do we really care about? We care about answering the question, am I going to be okay? Are my loved ones going to be okay? Not, is Bitcoin the future, or do I own the best mid-cap value fund, or is my portfolio efficient along the Markowitz frontier? No one really cares about those stuff. We're asking other questions that I think are much more important. And so, there's the permission piece, which is we can go there. And then there's the validation piece, which is even more powerful, which is that you're not alone, that other people are thinking about these same things. They too are scared to go there. But it's nice to know that others are in the same boat. And it's not so much a misery loves company. Maybe it is a little bit that element. But it's really nice to know that in some ways you're in some form of cohort in the world where other people like you are struggling with, this crazy thing called life.
So the permission and validation concept sort of strikes me in a way that I thought about social media when you said that, because I feel like social media is such a powerful tool to connect, but you have to sort of tread lightly and with intention, because sometimes in social media, you're actually not giving people permission, right? Or they're not validating you in the right ways, right? So there can be this sense of like projection, feeling like someone else has it all when we all know that nobody has it all. And so when you're thinking about building this and working with financial advisors and coaching financial advisors, and now thinking about using social media as one tool to share content that can impact well-being, like how do those two things, like how does the world of like the Kardashian, like Insta famous influencers with this really meaningful, important, like rich conversation about things that are so important, like how do you live within the two in a way that's positive?
I want to anchor on the word agency. I think that we sometimes underestimate and undervalue our own agency in the world, because life can often feel so overwhelming. And we can even, we could just narrow it to money world, and not just investing, but saving, spending, budgeting, giving, being charitable, how we go, think about the phrase, how we make a living. So it's a job, you sell your labor for cash, but we call it, making a living. That's a loaded phrase. And it's a deep phrase that we sort of gloss over. So if we anchor on the fact that we all have a lot of agency, probably more than we think we do, then we could choose to be along, this broad conversation, forces for good. And so, yeah, of course, there's the opportunity to, the word authenticity. What a lot of us are doing is sort of curating our authenticity, which is, sort of a weird paradoxical thing. Like, if you're curating your authenticity, then is it really authentic? But like, putting yourself out into the world as you really are and trying to help. So, one of the, so agency is one thing. Like, you can choose to try to do good. And then the second thing I'd put in the mix, and sort of what's at the emotional core of so much of the programming and coaching that we're doing with advisors and their clients, is empathy. So we do a lot of programming and training on empathy. And is empathy a trait or a skill? Yes. We underplay, though, the fact that it is a skill, and that we're not here, us as coaches, but all of us just being in the world together. The goal for any of us is not to become Oprah or Brene Brown. It's to become a slightly more empathetic or slightly kinder version of ourselves. And I think we all know that when we take that leap, which makes us feel vulnerable, I mean, hashtag Brene Brown, we know that it can make a real impact in the world. So, when we work in the traditional, stodgy, somewhat conservative world of wealth management, and we introduce this idea of empathy, we do have to revisit what I mentioned earlier, which is permission. But hey, we can talk about this. You have a choice to do better. You have agency, and you can choose to be a slightly more empathetic version of yourself. You can be better at this. And as a result, you can empower people to have, different perception, different attitude, make better decisions, which drive better outcomes.
Brian, so we work with firms across the country. We love working with advisors. And as you would expect, like, our clients on the spectrum of, if you show up authentically, if we say, lead with authenticity and vulnerability and be in that space and use marketing as a vehicle to express that, to self-actualize and run your business that way. We have clients who are totally bought in, they're into it. And then we have clients who are kind of like, I get it, I'm a little bit nervous about that, but I'm not sure that's actually going to resonate with my clients. Maybe they're kind of in the middle. Within the context of our entire industry, what percent, how much do you think are in that, we get it, money is an entry point to help people live more fulfilling lives, and these traits of empathetic listening, thinking about ideas of fulfillment is really where my highest value is, versus how our industry has historically operated in terms of it being about numbers and professionalism, all those things we feel are table stakes, but we also acknowledge and know that there's still quite a lot of our industry who believes the touchy-feely stuff may not belong there. In your experience, what do you think that mix is?
I've thought about that, and I've kind of given up trying to come up with a number. The fact is, the industry is massive. And we work with clients in the US, Canada, Europe, Australia. So, we're exposed to different firms, different cultures across different countries. We have clients that run the gamut. And so for us, it's important to think about being very attuned to how certain messages are landing. Because to the point earlier about authenticity, our goal is not to turn Gordon Gekko into Brene Brown, right? We want people to be whoever they are and attract the audience, i.e. clients, that makes sense for them. And if you're a hard charging broker and you want to sell securities and you want to be in the market, great, do that and find the people who are right for you. The fact is that, I'm thinking specifically of a couple, clients at either end of the spectrum. In one case, old school brokers who are just beginning to think about the idea that salespeople can also be financial planners. And it's a great conversation. It's, hey, I mean, look, there's a commercial element that's at the core of it, which is, let's build a recurring revenue business where we're selling financial plans as opposed to just selling, stocks and bonds or whatever. That's fine. But, as this organization embraces this broader notion of financial planning, let's dig into the ways in which that opens some doors to, talking about these broader notions of well-being without necessarily going all woo-woo on it. And at the other end, we work with full-blown life planners who get it. But, for the same reason that LeBron James has a head coach who tells him at times during the game that he needs to play defense harder or pass the ball more. By the way, LeBron James knows how to play basketball. It's really good for the best of the best to have coaches who are in their ears reinforcing the fundamentals. And so, across the spectrum, it seems to be landing well. And if we can frame, the solution just as, hey, there are better ways to help the people that you want to help. There's no one who's not into that. And if that is their attitude, if they really are kind of old school, Glengarry Glen Ross, Wall Street, they're probably not going to be right clients for us anyway. So it's fine.
It's funny. Sometimes it's sad, right? Sometimes, you look at the population and you think like, oh, there's such an opportunity here. I think where we've found a lot of alignment is in just really focusing on working with the advisors who share our worldviews and sort of want to build that better business that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like our impact and the work that we do every day sort of helps by extending that impact that they want to deliver to their clients by helping them get in front of more clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk a lot about sort of just reshaping, as Candace said, like not focusing on the table stakes, but really focusing on, where are the advisor's vision and values? How do they align? How does that sort of resonate with the change that they're trying to create within their individual business? So tell us a little bit about your personal story, Brian, and like how did your vision and values come together to find this alignment that you have now with Shaping Wealth? How does that relate to your personal journey?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Meg. I mean, what isn't one's personal journey? I'm pretty, I've written a few books, and I've been pretty transparent about the things along the way, both good and bad. And I'm on my fourth or fifth career, not job, career, because I started out in politics and then academia, and sort of stumbled into the world of money management about 23 years ago at Morningstar here in Chicago. And so, for me, the personal journey was, number one, just figuring out the technical pieces to it, but then recognizing after a number of years that there's a real personal side to money that sometimes gets explored, but often does not. And, among other light bulb moments, kind of the pivot from investment management, where I was in the hedge fund industry and managing portfolios and doing all of that, which was fun. It was lucrative. It was enjoyable. It was great. And moving more toward the wealth management industry, so the advice business, and seeing that the opportunity to help real people in their day-to-day was an even bigger opportunity than I thought it was. And then I combined that with the fact that, I've got 3 teenage kids, I've got aging parents. Some things are great, some things are not at all great. And so, especially when I wrote The Geometry of Wealth, which, I published that, I think, in 2018, which means I started, thinking and writing about it in 2015, 2016. So it's been quite some time now. It was me looking at, my kids at the time and just wondering, whether they were going to be okay. Seeing my parents begin to age and my wife's parents begin to age, and ask, geez, are they going to be okay? How are we going to be able to help them? And, so I had been writing and thinking about the investment piece of our world for many years. And I kind of came to the conclusion at that pivot point, like, who cares? Or at the very least, like, how about we situate that question within a broader context? And so the broader context is these questions like, am I going to be okay? How much is enough? does money buy happiness? And once I turned the light on in that dark room and I walked into it and I embraced it, I kind of felt like I got into, I felt a certain alignment with myself. And, the book's been really well received, which is humbling. And then, it's clear, from the geometry of wealth, the shaping wealth, it's the inspiration for this business. And, knock wood, about a year and a half into this, it's going well. The message that we can have a broader conversation about money, and doing so is a skill that we need to practice, seems to be landing really well with a lot of people.
Do you talk to your teenagers about some of these concepts? Like, do you talk to them about funded contentment? Do you talk to them about underwriting a meaningful life? I mean, I have to imagine, like, you're their dad, so it's probably like woven into things. Like, do you have serious conversations with them?
Well, I hear words like cringe. And at other times I hear nothing because they're just staring at their phone. Tracy and I have been, I think, deliberately transparent about certain elements of money life, because I know growing up, money was a great source of stress in the house. Not that we didn't have any, it's just my parents fought about it constantly, and it was the zero-sum battle, and it was really quite miserable. I didn't want them to have that experience. And so, I'm not showing them my pay stub. I'm not getting into the details of the family portfolio, but I want to create, and I think we've created a culture of transparency in our family where we can talk about what things cost. We can talk about things that we can't afford. I've done pretty well over the years, and there's lots of stuff that we either can't afford outright or we can afford, but it's not a good use of our money. We've taken, we love travel as a family. There's been opportunities to say, hey, that thing, these two things cost X versus 3X. We can do either. What do you think the trade-offs are? So I'm not talking to my kids about funded contentment, but we are trying to create a healthy attitude toward these things, because so much of money life becomes stigmatized at a younger age. I want them to kind of have the wiring and the space to engage in these things when their lives get much, much more complicated, with having jobs and needing to save and invest and having a partner and at some point having kids and all that. It's gonna, life's gonna get messy. Hopefully some of this stuff rubs off on them.
I feel like that's such a wonderful gift that you're giving them, because having open, truly, and transparent conversations. I mean, you shared a little bit.
Can you call them and tell them that? I don't think they appreciate much of anything.
Right after this, Brian. Right after it.
But you shared a little bit of your story and growing up and what it was like, what that money conversation was like in your household. And I think as a child, when you were a child, and I think we all have our own money stories that we bring forward. And we had a New School podcast guest, Anna and Jai Conte, on last year. And she just talked about like removing judgment as it relates to money. And so the reason that I say that I really believe you're giving your children a gift is because if you send them off into the world, having had these transparent and honest conversations without judgment, right? Mm-hmm. Then they're not going to bring that forward with them when they move into their careers and whatever the future looks like for them. And I think that that's just really important. I mean, Anna was talking to us about, as an industry, we have minimums. So you talk to people and they're like, the first thing they think about when you ask them, do you work with a financial advisor, is, oh, I probably can't afford it. Mm-hmm. I probably don't meet the minimum. Like they're putting judgment on themselves because of how the industry shows up. So there was a sort of, I think, hidden thinking behind the question about how you're talking with your children, because so much of this, I think, is ingrained in like how we're raised and how we develop. And so as an industry, if we can hear these things and if we can see these examples and if we can have emotional resonance for how Brian talks with his children, that actually could have significant impact.
So you used the phrase how the industry shows up. And if I can just press on that, because I really like that phrasing. And the fact is that the industry shows up in a really lousy way most of the time. And I've thought about this a lot lately because what we're doing, for the most part is training, our main program is called Building the Behavioral Advisor. We think about it as someone who really takes seriously the human experience of money. And that's a big, big conversation. The fact, so we're sort of, building out the supply side of behavioral advice, but I've increasingly thought about, well, what's the demand side? What is it that, let's just say, use the word consumers. It's not as fancy as clients or partners or whatever. It's just, okay, there's people out there who have budgets and they want to spend on, money on things that are valuable to them. What is the consumer interest in behavioral advice? And I'd say that in one way, it's growing, but still small, because the industry has done such a lousy job at articulating what's possible. And when I think about Anna, who I'm a huge fan of, I actually got to meet her in person at a conference a few weeks ago, which was just such a privilege. She's one of the people who's putting out into the world that we can talk about these things. It's the permission and validation rhythm that is so important. The industry has such a long way to go. And by industry, I mean the financial advice business, financial advisors, advisory platforms, of telling the world that we are allowed to talk about where money fits into a meaningful life. And yes, there are very specific budgeting and charitable giving and taxation and estate issues that need to be dealt with. But, in the vein of Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, advisors are both mechanics and guides. And so you can handle the mechanical thing, but you can also be a guide. And we're seeing more of that storytelling. I know you guys are helping advisors with that storytelling, but there ain't much of it. And it would be good if there were more, because the other forms of well-being, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, which to me are the kind of the three in addition to financial, we've got legitimate institutionalized help in those other areas. We have physicians, we have clergy, we have therapists, and you may or not, you may, avail yourself of those folks or not, but they're right there and they're easy. When you think about your financial well-being, well, first of all, what in the hell does that even mean? But beyond that, like, who's helping you with that? And the fact that your, financial advisor probably isn't helping you think more broadly about your financial well-being tells you how far we have to go.
There's so much I could say about this, and there's so many questions that I have for you, Brian, because you're just like in our world in terms of the things we're consistently thinking about. We're coaching advisors across the spectrum in their businesses. And I think a lot of our coaching centers around that permission piece, right? And so, because that's really the crux of it, because I think we want to be human, we want to be vulnerable, and we want to be authentic. For nothing else except for it's less tiring. Like, like when we can just like be ourselves, it's like less tiring, and we can create greater connections. So part of what we really do through what we call our new school ethos is we don't coach on or advise our clients on anything we haven't done firsthand. So that's one of the things that we're really like clear on. And so we call it the vein of like demonstration. So instead of telling, we're always demonstrating. So our ways of being communicate versus just our words. When you're thinking about coaching all of your advisors, are you seeing the same? Is this showing up differently for you? What is your experience in that helping people shape their behaviors and their mindsets to be able to deliver greater value and impact?
Yeah, I really like that. So yeah, I think we're in total alignment, because we talk about this idea of player coaches, which I wasn't sure how that was going to land like a year ago, and it's landed exceptionally well. It seems like, people understand that in sports, sometimes you can have, someone on the team who's not just a coach, but they're on the court or they're on the pitch with you. And so when we talk to advisors about us training player coaches in the quest for funded contentment, they get that. And so when we have people go through our courses and we work with them, we say, it's not acceptable that you just attend. We need you to show up, meaning that we need you to really engage in your own personal journey and what seems to be landing. It's really early days, but we're paying close attention to how our learners are kind of reacting and responding. And to the extent that we are framing our coaching as an opportunity for personal growth, what is funded contentment to you? How do you underwrite a meaningful life? Where, how much is enough? Are you going to be okay? All the big questions that we like to explore. The feedback we're getting from advisors is great and quite consistent across different audiences and different experiences, which is, you're asking of me questions I've asked clients for 20 or 30 years, and no one's ever asked me before. No one's ever asked me my money story. No one's ever asked me what money means to me. No one's ever asked me whether or not I think money buys happiness. Well, we're asking all of those questions and many, many others over the experiences that we create. And we're finding that opportunity for personal growth then has wonderful consequences for professional development. Because you can get to the end of the line and ask really, I think, sterile and tin-eared questions about return on investment and things like that. Like, oh, if I take your class, is it going to produce X number of new assets and fees? And, I understand we, including me, have to pay the bills. But there is something about not just attending, but showing up and, learning how to be that authentic self, delivering a better experience for your clients. And if that doesn't translate into higher client satisfaction, higher retention rates, more clients, more assets, then something has gone wrong in the mix. We're seeing that those, end of the line quantitative material consequences are very much happening, but not because we're managing to them. They just stem from a more authentic process.
So I have an interesting question, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer it, but I'd love kind of like your gut response, and maybe it's something that you've thought about before. But one of the reasons we tell our clients to speak from firsthand experience, and the reason that we only speak from or advise on from anything from firsthand experience is because we're now to the point that we started with in the information space. There's so much content available. Anyone can create videos, anyone can create podcasts. And we've become so discerning that we can tell when someone's selling to us, and we can tell when someone's not talking from firsthand experience. So it's not just some woo-woo progressive notion. It's like it's a notion to increase effectiveness. And I know you're a PhD and you've got all this really impressive experience. So what is it? How is it that we're able to discern when someone's not speaking from firsthand experience?
So my partner, Neil, is an expert in applied neuroscience. I don't know if we could patch him in because I don't know. Let me just give you a real short answer because a fulsome answer is I don't know how to fully explain it. But the fact is that we are social creatures, and we are highly, highly attuned social creatures. And so, things like status and envy and reciprocity and a lot of these dimensions that go into the nature of our social relationships, which are genetically wired and very much constitutive of our evolving identity as individual humans. We're just Johnny on the spot. Like we pick things up pretty quickly. So maybe there's an element of skill to it in terms of, okay, in the internet age, when someone's pitching you in a certain way, but I don't know. I think all of us sort of recognize that when someone's pitching you versus speaking from the heart, you can just pick up on it. But that's also hundreds of years of evolution of us being social creatures, us being tribal in a good sense, small t, not the big T for today's politics. We just get it.
Yeah.
So Candace and I were at a conference last week, and there was a speaker, very old school industry speaker, who was coaching the audience on picking up on physical cues from clients when you're meeting and all the things.
All the things.
But really the punchline for him, for the speaker at the end, was, when you see your male client do this, go for the close.
Yeah.
Go for the close. And I mean, Candace and I were like so offended on so many levels.
Wow. Yeah.
It was remarkable. So having this conversation, Brian, like just a few days after that, gives me such fulfillment and hope. And because truthfully, Candace and I could talk to you about this for days and still have a hunger for more and wanting to learn more and experience more through your experiences. So thank you for what you're doing and what you're building with Shaping Wealth and with your first course, Building the Behavioral Advisor. What does like outrageous success look like for you? Like, what are you building toward?
I myself am building toward funded contentment. I've thought about this a lot, and I think one of the right ways to frame what most of us want is to do so not as a maximization problem, but an optimization problem. I think a lot about, in fact, I think book 4, which I don't know, 2027, I haven't started it, so who the hell knows, is going to be on this tension in our lives, this genetically wired tension between wanting more and having enough. So desire versus satisfaction, both like virtuous, wholly incompatible at any moment in time. I want to do what I'm doing right now, which is to just wake up and flow into my work, into my writing, into talking to people about things I think matter. But I suspect that for most of them, it matters to them, and they often haven't been given not only the permission, but then on the back end of that, the mental models, the frameworks we bring to bear. I love this process of simplification. So, to me, I don't want to grow a big business. I've got 2 amazing partners, Joy Leary and Neil Page. They're amazing human beings who also happen to be like crazy talented. I want the 3 of us to build something really cool. I want my children to be proud of me. I want to be able to, I don't know, I just do what I'm doing now, and giving myself the flexibility and the time affluence, which is something we actually do coaching on time affluence for financial advisors, because they often lack the vocabulary for talking to clients about the trade-off between money and time, which is very actually granular and tactical. But so I think a lot about time affluence, and I have a fair bit of that now. Like, I'm never busy. I just have priorities and I get to set my own.
Brian, thanks so much for coming on. We close out every episode by asking our guests, because this is the New Skool podcast, what does the New Skool mean to you?
Oh man, the New Skool is the willingness to talk about money's relevance in leading a meaningful life. Being able to go there and ask the uncomfortable questions that everybody actually wants to talk about.
Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you?
Shapingwealth.com. Everything's there. Overview of who we are, a little bit on our programming, building the behavioral advisor. That is, and then I guess Twitter. Financial Twitter has actually been an amazing experience for me for many years now. The friends and the learning opportunities, notwithstanding all the noise and the BS of Twitter, it's sort of my day-to-day office, and I love the experience there. And I'm at Brian Portnoy, so I'm easy to find there.
Thanks so much for coming on, Brian.
Thank you.